Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
We're most pleased to welcome you to today's program, and we have a very, very wonderful topic. It's the history of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and our guest is really a true historian that can shed so much light on this great story. We welcome to the program Clifford St. John, who is the Director of Cultural Awareness of the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Casino of the Coeur d'Alene Tribe. I've known Mr. St. John for many years, and we're very honored to have him here to talk about this very important subject. Clifford, welcome to the program. It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much, sir. It's good to see you.
Also, I'm very pleased to welcome our regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho. And Janelle will start today's questioning.
It's a privilege for me to be here with you and to ask you some questions. There's some things I've always wondered about and wanted to ask, and I know you'll be able to explain. What were the original tribal lands of the Coeur d'Alenes? Where were they, the aboriginal tribal lands of the Coeur d'Alene Indian tribe?
Our homelands were stretched across a wide area. From the north in the Pend d'Oreille Lake, easterly towards what is now Thompson Falls, and then southeasterly to what's now St. Regis, Montana, then back to the Bitterroot Mountains and straight south down to the headwaters of the Clearwater River, and then westerly across where the towns of Colton and Thornton are now, and then north to where the town of Cheney is, and from Cheney kind of north and east to about where the Sullivan exit is on Interstate 90, and then to the foothills of Mount Spokane and Rathdrum Prairie and back to Pend d'Oreille Lake. It contained about 5.9 million acres that the tribe protected, followed their food sources, and had our homelands and winter lodges were around Coeur d'Alene Lake.
That's a very large area. Now, in the rotation, how long would it take to travel in that area, and were all of those areas traveled in a year?
It was what the old people used to talk about was that it would take 10 days to go around what is now Coeur d'Alene Lake by horseback. It was a pretty rugged country. It would take 10 days to go around. They also moved down to the Clearwater and would fish with the Nez Perce near the Palouse, where Palouse River enters into the Clearwater, and from there back to this country here, between the Coeur d'Alene Lake and Pend d'Oreille Lake. This area here, it would take them 7 days. With packing all their gear and everything from down there up to here. So to give you an idea of the length, also from here they would send groups of young men every spring and summer into the plains area, hook up with the Flathead people and go out onto the plains in eastern Montana to hunt buffalo. They'd go in large numbers for safety purposes against the crow and the Blackfeet, who were our arch enemies, and our young men would take buffalo and dry the meat and then bring it back for the winter camps in the fall. So the fishing was done along the what's now the Spokane River, and the Pend d'Oreille Lake and the Coeur d'Alene Lake. So.
Very interesting. Now, another question that I've always had is, what was the original name for the Coeur d'Alene Indian tribe? I think the Coeur d'Alene might have been given to, the name Coeur d'Alene might have been given to them by the Frenchmen who came to this area. But you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're correct in that aspect, is that we call ourselves Stichumsh and Skitsu and Skitsumsh, which is all the form of the word of Stichumsh, which means the discovered ones. We were always here. We've always called ourselves that, and the other tribes have called us Skitsumsh, which is the same connotation as the discovered ones. In sign language, they called us people with the wide bow. For sign language, it was a case of using your hand like so, and then like that was for people with the wide bow. For example, the people of the Spokane country, the Spokane Indian people, we would be the people at the falls who eat the fish, and that was their sign in sign language when people would talk. And so
Very interesting.
Kalispel people were the short canoe people.
Wonderful.
Oh, wonderful stories. Clifford, we have a new wonderful system, and that is we have closed caption for all of our programs. And for those who are translating this for us, and again, we've not heard much about the original name of the tribe, which you still have, along with the Coeur d'Alene tribe. Would you spell for us the name of your, going back originally?
Sure. Skitlu was spelled by the English and the Canadian people with S-K-I-T-S-U, Skitsu, and then later an umsh was put on the end, U-M-S-H, Skitsumsh, and it was, I believe, the word of what we call ourselves, Chichumsh, and it was kind of a slang. For example, the other tribes had other quick names that was used for them, like the Spokanes. There was several groups of Spokanes. They all had their little names. So, but Skitsu and Skitchumsh and then Stichumsh. Stichumsh is SCHEE-CHU-UMSH. Stichumsh, which is the discovered ones.
You know, another thing that you've done is in recent years, I have such wonderful friends that I've talked to over the years within your wonderful community, and the language at one point was almost lost. And in recent years, people such as yourself and Henry Cy John and Lawrence Arabia and others have really done a lot. Your language is very much intact with the young now. Don't you teach the language now to your younger members of the tribe?
Yes, the tribal school has a program K through 8 that is on computer for those children, and it's part of their curriculum to study the language in the workbooks that have been developed over the years. Also in the high school, we have the Coeur d'Alene language, oddly enough, is a foreign language credit, and we also have a language program within the tribal government, and has adult classes as well as classes for after school for students in our language.
That is wonderful. Our roots, for all of us, is just so very important, and you're to be praised for doing this. You have many wonderful customs and traditions that are very, very special and very sacred to you. Before the program, we were talking, Clifford, about you and others that are the elders of the tribe got from your ancestors, and you're passing down to your children and grandchildren and all this very vital history. Would you give us some examples of the kind of things that are being handed down that deal with your customs and traditions, you know, your hunting and your different very sacred ceremonies, and I'm sure our audience will be very interested.
Sure. I think to start with is the oral history portion of it, of the way we learned, the way I learned from my grandfather and my grandmother and my uncles, my father and mother, all through oral history. There was a time when my brother and I would stay with the old folks, and they would have this one room, and there was an old stove in the middle. There's no radio, certainly no TV or anything like that at that time, and you could see the fire flickering at night, and then all the way around the room, the old people would sit, and they'd have beds all the way around the room. So a living room turned into a bedroom for everybody, and then they'd put us to bed, and we'd lay there with blankets over us, and then they would start telling stories all the way around, all through the night. and different uncles tell different hunting stories, different things that happened in the mountains with our family when the grizzly bears came, and Stoy Night came, which was what's called the Stick Indian came, the mysterious things that happened in the mountains, and so on and so on, all the way around the room. Then they would talk about a long time ago, the war with the soldiers, the coming of white people into this country, the early times of first contact with white people, what we lived like, what it was like to live in those lodges and what they're made of, and on and on and on and on. And my brother and I were just lived in a treasure of knowledge with our parents and our grandfolks. So.
Just great stories. Another issue I want to discuss with you, and that has to do with some of the ceremonies that you have today, and you've been very generous to invite non-members of the tribe to many of these great events that you have. Would you share some of that with us?
Well, we have our powwows, that is now currently called powwow. However, in the early times when I was growing up, it was war dance, and it was still called war dance, kakuenchi, and they would go to practice our culture and our tradition. And we were taught at that time that during the cup dance, during the veterans dance, during the sneak up dance, all the different things that we do now, they taught us the reason for them. For example, long ago, the sneak up dance was used to taunt your enemy and on the battlefield, and to mimic what it was like to be on that battlefield, to duck and dive and dodge arrows and so on and so forth, and stand up and show yourself and then duck down. That ceremony is still prevalent today, and the way we learned it was that we would duck and dive, but our enemy was different. Our enemy was no longer different tribes, but our enemy was poor behavior, poor character, being a poor husband, being a poor son, being disrespectful. All those things, those were our enemies. And later, as my teenage years, it was brought up, alcohol was your enemy, drugs was your enemy, that kind of thing. But most of all, disrespect to the elders was a big enemy, and to always fight it off. So the sneak up dance, for example, is a training period for our young men. The young girls, when they get into their portion of dancing, was the same thing. They dance with dignity. They dance with beauty, and they float like on a cloud when they dance, and that they always present themselves in a beautiful and a magnificent representation of the people, in their hair, their structure of their hair, the structure of what they wear on their hair, around their necks, around their bodies. It's all for the protection of the people, and that when they dance. So, and every step is a prayer for them, for the old people.
I've been present at powwows. They're just incredibly wonderful and very, very powerful. I'll go on to Janelle Burke for the next question.
I want to ask a question in this next round of questions about what women did in the early culture. What kinds of jobs and duties did they have, and what did they do for fun, if they had any? But I'm sure they did.
Well, they had a lot of fun. They had, but to start with, they began learning as a young child, the importance of their position within the tribe. Now, we're talking about Coeur d'Alene's now.
Yes.
The Stichum's people. They would take those little girls and they would teach them young how to prepare the cooking, the animals, so on and so forth, the camp things, the things that were structured around the making of teepees out of buffalo hide. There's the knack of making lodges out of bark, cedar bark, for the winter lodges. And those kind of survival things were one of the first things they learned. they also would be taken to a special camp just with the grandmothers. And the grandmothers would sit there and talk to them as young girls to prepare them to be going from young girls to young women to women. And they would teach them about the transition thereof and the importance that went with each one, even the importance of taking a spouse and how to take care of their family and those responsibilities, how to weave, how to make baskets, how to make all the things that your family used, and how to ride. There was also a group of women who would ride with the men on different raiding parties, the young girls, young teenage girls. But they had to be tough. They had to ride like men, and they had to fight like men, and they were taught that by the old people. Those girls were called the Scalp Dancers, and they would ride right along with the men into battle, into enemy territory, so on and so forth. Then when they come back, there would be a special, what they called a Scalp Dance, and these girls would come out in their beautiful wear, their beautiful dresses, and as they made their rounds in different levels of a song, and then the families would come out and put things on them, and put tail gears on them, put arm feathers on them and things like that, and then pretty soon paint their faces as each round went around. Pretty soon end up putting war bonnet on their head or porcupine hair on their head or wolf or bear or something, and turn them into warriors. And they'd see them transition themselves from young women into warriors right in front of your face. And there was much excitement that the women had this power to do that. And the women in the Coeur d'Alene, the Stichels people, were held very high. Even to the grandmother position was the teacher, was the certainly the mother of the tribes. But her responsibility was also to advise, and they advised the chiefs in regards to movement of war parties, of who was going to lead the group to the fishing grounds, who was going to lead the group to the camas digging grounds, etc., etc. The older women had a very significant role within the tribe. And for fun, they were like any other young girls, get together and comb each other's hair and talk about the hottest guy in the village or something like
Talk
that.
about the guys.
Yeah, the one who had the most horses and the one that was the greatest warrior. So that was their life. Their life was simple, and yet the complexity of it was that their spirits would guide them in the development of their speaking hearts of true talk, true heart talk. That it was the spirit first, and then their heart, and they could see with their heart. Our grandmothers always told us, both the young men and the women, that if you speak from your heart, you will always have clean hands.
Thank you.
Such beautiful philosophy. And in the story you were telling, Clifford, it sure is clear that there are certain things across all different cultures and societies, and that is about the young people and how they look at other young people and picking a partner for life. Something else that is very interesting in the history here, and our program goes into many other places, including Canada, but one of the things that has been part of your culture very much is that when the Catholic priests came and into the area, and you have places named such as De Smet, share with us, would you please, how the Catholic Church influenced the tribe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a lot of your wonderful spiritual beliefs and your love for nature was integrated with the Catholic faith that came to your tribe.
Our first initial contact with the Jesuits was one that was foretold by the circling raven years before they arrived. He had a vision and saw them and said that there would be a man in a black robe carrying a cross stick, and that the tribe should embrace him because he was going to show us an additional way to the heaven trails. We had our ways that our grandmothers left for us, and now we would have an additional way to the heaven trails. We'd have two ways. and to walk them both. And with that prophecy and that vision, which still holds today, the Coeur d'Alene tribe did do that. Several years later, almost 40 years later, the Jesuits came walking into the Rastrum Prairie, and he was found stumbling around and pretty hungry. And the Coeur d'Alenes picked him up and brought him to the main camps, and that's where our relationship with the Catholic Church started. It was embraced because during the teachings of the Black Robe, they quickly recognized they already believed in one supreme being, the Amotkan, the Creator. And they knew that the Creator had created the sun. And so the Amotkan must live in the sun, because when he would come up in the morning, he would warm the Mother Earth. And new things would come, new grasses, new waters, new animals, new seasons, new clouds, new winds, all of those things. And we understood that, and we were in balance with that. And the fact that we accepted that the Amotkan, his messengers, the Creator's messengers to us, was in the form of the animal spirit, and the animals would bring us power. Now, when the Jesuit came and he opened his book and he began to talk about the angel, they would look at these drawings of these people with wings on their back, and they connected that the messengers of God was these people with wings, the animals, the birds. When they were shown the picture of Jesus, baby Jesus, laying there, and they recognized all those animals around him in that drawing, the cow, the donkey, the sheep, they recognized he had animals around him. Those were our messengers, and they were quickly Christianized because they already believed in that. The problem was that the Jesuit and the Catholic religion in later years did not accept that our belief could possibly be running parallel to their beliefs. And they began to try to eliminate that thought within our people by saying the spiritual dances, the medicine dances, were the devil's work. And there was a time when we went through a period of, after embracing the Catholicism, that some of those who were in charge of Catholicism, some of those priests who came, turned things around on us. And we went through a pretty rough time where there was an attempt to destroy our culture and our tradition and our ceremonial ways. We went through some hard times. In about 1930, it finally changed. But from about 1900 to 1930, it was very rough for us. And there was a lot of things that happened that were very painful to the Coeur d'Alene people, but they kept their spirit with the Amotkan and with God, because there was both ways to the heaven trails, and they were the same. The Creator was the same. He just appeared to us in a different way.
What a beautiful story, and also how you kept your faith in that way, and it worked out after a painful period. Janelle Berg.
Your people have had a way of doing things long before there were automobiles or computers or television sets or a lot of other things. But I've always had a great deal of respect for the fact that they were very creative in dealing with what they had and how they used it. For example, great distances could be covered, and they would know where they were and how long it took and how far it was. So can you explain how some of this was done for us, because we wonder about those things?
Sure. We talk about in our history with our students, our public school system, Lewis and Clark. We're just now having a big bicentennial with them, and how their Corps of Discovery came out and discovered much. David Thompson came out of Canada with his Northwest Fur Company and his traders, and Hudson Bay Company, the ones who gave us the name Coeur d'Alene, which meant heart of an awl or pointed heart. It had to do with our ability to trade. We were good at it, and we were always trading up and never down, and they always had to bring in more trade goods and those kind of things. So when we think of those men, it's like, well, gee, we must have just been sitting here waiting for them. Then we call ourselves the discovered ones, kind of connotates, oh, we were sitting around here waiting for them. But when in reality, we had our own trading routes. And we would go north into Canada to trade. We would go west onto the Okanagans and the Columbia, and even sometimes into the coastal area to trade with tribes there. We had trade routes established. When David Thompson came into this area from Northwest Fur Company, he noted those trade routes. He even named one of those trading routes as Skitsu Road, which is around Rathdrum Prairie and then around up Spokane Valley. And he named this, like I said, this lake, Skitsu Lake. We called it Waitum. And so over the years, changed to Coeur d'Alene. But those trails, David Thompson marked those trails. And all those trails later were used by the military. And the military, for example, Mullen, Lieutenant Mullen, later Captain Mullen of the Fort Walla Walla, when he built his road, he used an Indian trail that he was Coeur d'Alene by the name of Basil was the one who showed him this route. So now we have Interstate 90 that goes from state to state, and it's over trails. We have different state highways that follow these trade routes along lakes and rivers and so on and so forth. So the question is, who was the discoverer? Who was the expedition guys?
The time is up. I'm so sorry we have to quit this point. Clifford, it's been wonderful having you on the program.
It has been wonderful.
It has been a great program, and you've been so informative, and good luck in all your work. And again, on behalf of our staff, we thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, good. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the Coeur d'Alene Indian people, we certainly welcome any questions, and I'm sure available to come back anytime.
Thank you. And we'll put this in the library. We'll put it in the library so others can see it too. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the program as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please be with us again next week at the same time when we will discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.